Hello there, fans and frenemies. Nate Draikinator here, back with another video. I'm gonna go ahead and drop a solid trigger warning on this one. Um, I'm gonna be talking about, obviously things that are painful. So some of these things involve blood, some of these things involve vomit, some of them involve horrible, cringy, ow, that is horrible, and I hope that never happens to me. Uh, Eyeball trauma, broken bones, good old stuff. Like, hey, if you don't want to hear about a bunch of times that I got super hurt or something that really hurt happened, maybe skip this one. So yeah, you know what? Let's just make this a solid PG-13 warning. Hi, editing Nate here. I recorded this before September 2022, so the 2 weeks that I spent getting like 5 kidney stones is not in this. It hadn't happened yet. But I already talked about that in a different video, so I don't feel like I need to re-record this whole thing. To heck with it. Happy holidays. You get this, whatever this is. Alright, back to the video. So we're going to start it at number 10, and I've organized these sort of like how painful I would say they are. Like, when I think of them, which one makes me cringe the most? I did consider titling this a much funnier title, ranking the top 10 most painful moments of my life by how stupid they made me look. But unfortunately, a lot of these are not actually my fault. Usually when I get hurt, it's my fault. So unfortunately, that one just didn't work here. It's too bad. Anyway, so number 10 is a really easy one. It's when I was 5, I broke my arm. And this one I'm putting it down at number 10 because I really don't even remember it, honestly. But I know that I was in a lot of pain because I can vaguely remember it. And also, like, my mom and dad have told me the story. And I was in kindergarten, and there were these like 2 trees that were like next to each other. They had a bunch of roots, and I was like skipping, and I went to skip through the trees, and I tripped on a root, and I fell, and I just like snapped my ulna, the bone in your arm that's on the side that's not got your thumb. Just snapped it like a twig. I was 5. I had brittle bones. So that happened, and I remember like wailing and crying, and my parents came and picked me up and drove me to the hospital. And I don't know, my mom has said like that I have a terrible fear of needles, that I was kicking and screaming, and then they had to sedate me because I was losing my mind. It was a whole thing. So I know I must have been like in extraordinary pain, but I'm 28. That was 23 years ago. I barely remember this, but I figured I should put it on the list. So number 9 is something much more recent, and it is the time that I just didn't stop bleeding for 12 hours. So I'd had I have this like molar that I had to have removed because I had my wisdom teeth out, but one of them had a nerve that was running directly through it, so they didn't want to pull it. So they pulled the molar in front of it instead because it was kind of like not in a great place anyway. So they pulled the molar so that the wisdom tooth could grow in, and they wouldn't have to mess with the nerve, and it would all be great. And pulling a molar is like a much bigger deal than pulling a wisdom tooth, though. So even though I'd had all 3 wisdom teeth out at the same time, the molar getting pulled was like a way, like it hurt more, it lingered more, it was a bigger deal. But they took it out, and all was well at first because I'd already had the wisdom teeth pulled pretty recently. I was like prepared. I had all my soup. I was good. I went and I stayed at my boyfriend's house. But for some reason, the blood just did not clot. So, my gum, like my jaw where they had removed the tooth, the blood is supposed to clot, like it make a scab or whatever, and then it stops bleeding. And that didn't happen. I really don't know why. But it did not clot. And so I'm home, and it just kept bleeding. And it kept bleeding for over 12 hours. And so I decided that I didn't want to go to the ER because I didn't really know what they could do. I wanted to wait until morning and go back in at 8 a.m. and say, hey, I haven't stopped bleeding. And I think if I'd realized how bad it was going to get overnight, that I would have probably gone to the ER that evening. But I didn't. And by the time I was like, wow, I should have gone to the ER, it was like, well, I only have to wait one more hour, you know? So I couldn't sleep that night because I was worried. Like, my blood just kept coming. It would fill up my mouth. And I was like worried that I would drown in it because I just kept getting a mouthful of blood. So I didn't sleep that night. And I just sat on the couch with a bucket and just kept spitting up blood every time my mouth would get filled. And by the time 8 a.m. I went in, I was pale and lethargic. My boyfriend said I looked like I was dying, and he was very worried. I went in, they threw some clotting agent, but I remember talking to the nurse, whatever, and I was like, "Hey, I don't seriously. If I I know a lot of it's spit, but if even a quarter of what I have spit up in the last 12 hours is blood, I have lost a massive amount of blood, like at least a quart." And she was like, "Yeah, sure, yeah, whatever." Like, she didn't take me seriously at all, and I was pretty miffed about that, but whatever. What are you gonna do? They put the clotting agent on, and then I walked outside, and it had been snowing, so the ground was covered in snow and ice, and it was all perfect and pretty. And well, in addition to spitting up blood all night, I had swallowed a lot of it. And if you don't know, your stomach does not like blood. It does not digest. So that was when it hit, though, is I immediately doubled over and just fucking projectile vomited all over the snow. Blood, when it starts to digest, it turns black, and so I just threw up this chunky black half digested blood, and it was the most foul smell I think I've ever smelled in my life, and it was all over the snow. So it was oh my god, it was such a stark difference. I was on my knees, I was shaking, I was like, oh my god, oh my god, I definitely puked up a pint. There was so much, and I was like, ugh. My boyfriend just turned around and ran back inside and was like, hey, what do we do? I was fine. So I'm putting this one low on the list because I was in horrible pain all night, but I would say this was not a sharp pain. It was a dull pain, and it was more of a discomforting experience than an explicitly painful one, but I was in such a bad way that I really wanted to include it because I did puke up a pint of blood. So that's number 9. Number 8 is the time I broke my foot, and now this is a stupid one. I used to go LARPing a lot, live action role playing, and that's where you dress up like a wizard and you go into the woods and you hit your friends with sticks. And we were in a tavern, which is it's just a big building. And I was playing a healer at the time, and I was trying to get away from a monster that was attacking me. So I climbed up on a picnic table, and then I jumped off on the other side, because I knew that the guy playing that, he wasn't going to climb over the table. He was going to go around it, which would give me an extra second to get away. So I jumped off the table, and I landed bad. I landed on the balls of my feet on one foot, and then I went too far forward. And my very first thought, as soon as I landed, was, I just broke my foot. and then my second thought was, no, I didn't. It's fine. And so I just sort of pretended that I did not, and played it off and didn't tell anyone, and spent the rest of the weekend, because I'd already paid to be there, not telling anyone that I had broken my foot, and I just didn't take my shoe off. And Sunday I took my shoe off, and I was like, yes, it is huge and black and purple. I should go to the hospital. I had snapped a metatarsal, and it was broken. My mom came and took me to the urgent care, because I could not drive. So that was fun, and that was a stupid one. People still yell at me about not telling anyone that I broke my foot and hiking 5 miles on it like an idiot. Number 7 is going to be one that is interesting. It's actually one experience I had with period cramps. I have always had really, really bad period cramps. I don't know why. I don't know if there's something wrong with me. I have a sneaking suspicion something is wrong. I don't think that it's normal, but I don't know. And every doctor I've ever seen has been like, was it a problem now? And I'm like, no, because I've been on an IUD since I was 19, which is birth control, and it stops your period. So I haven't had a period in like 10 years. So they're like, well, as long as you're not having that anymore, then it's fine. We just won't look into it. And I'm like, oh, okay. I guess we're not going to do anything about that. But while I was still living in China, I've always had bad ones, and they're always like bad enough that I have to take off work or school like every month because I can't move. But I have no idea why it was this time, but I was in Beijing and it hit during the night. And the amount of pain I was in was so unbelievable. Like I couldn't move. I could barely like breathe. Like if you've ever been in enough pain that like you have to focus on remembering to breathe because it feels like the pain is like consuming so much of your like mental process and focus that you have to physically force yourself to remember to breathe. I was doing that for like 8 hours. It all night until the sun rose, and I just like I couldn't move. It was horrible. I have no idea what happened or why it was so bad or so long. But I also didn't have anything that I could take for it at the time either because I was living in China and I just didn't have a lot of stuff. So I didn't have any Motrin or anything. So I just had to deal with it for 8 hours of I can't move. I can't get out of bed. I couldn't even talk. It's horrible. So that's number 7. Number 6 is the time I almost froze to death. This was also while I was living in China. A lot of these are while I was living in China. I was not having a great time. Again, it was not related to China. China was lovely, but I was just stupid. So I had to go to Harbin for reasons. And so I had to, it was a very sudden kind of emergency trip. It was, all right, you have to get out of here right now and go to Harbin. And I was like, okay. And they're like, the train leaves in half an hour, go. And I was like, So I had to run to the train, and then I had to, then it was like a, 12-hour train ride up to Harbin. Harbin is on a little peninsula in China that actually like juts into Russia. Until the 1950s, I think until the 1950s it was Russia, and then they gave it to China in like a, Treaty of Versailles or something like that. I don't remember. I remember looking it up like 2 years ago, but it's the home of the International Ice and Snow Festival, so it's extremely cold there. And I went in like February 1st. It was maybe a little bit more. I remember it was right after the snow festival ended. Might have been around Spring Festival. Anyway, yeah. So I went, and because it had been so sudden, I had nothing but like a lightweight hoodie on. And it was it was negative 19 while I was there, and I had no money, and I had no jacket, and I did not speak the local dialect, and I was having a horrible time. So I went and did the things that I needed to do while I was there, and then I was alone, and I couldn't figure out how to get back to the train station because I couldn't speak the local dialect, and I didn't have enough money to get a taxi to take me. So I had just started trying to walk back the way I thought I remembered us getting there, and I got lost, and then I got more lost, and I was there for hours wandering around, and again, negative 19 Fahrenheit, wearing virtually nothing. I didn't even have gloves. So it got bad enough that I was legitimately worried that I was going to die. And I had my sketchbook in my backpack, so like I got it out, and I didn't have my passport on me for reasons. So I got it out, and I wanted to write like my name and information so that if I froze to death, someone would be able to identify me and let people know. Yeah, it was rough. But the thing is when I tried to close my hand around the pen, I couldn't. And I was like, okay. So I shook my hand a lot to try to get some feeling into it, and that did not work. So I picked up my hand, and then I slapped the pavement as hard as I could to try to get some feeling back into it. And I didn't feel anything. And I looked at my hand, and like I just slapped like, the concrete sidewalk. So like there were little pinpricks of blood, just like because I just like slapped concrete. So there was just little pinpricks of blood, but I didn't feel anything. And that's when I like started to panic, and I threw it back in my bag, and then I just like started running, trying to find the direction that I had come from to find the train station again. And when I finally ran out of energy, I just kind of like collapsed on the side of the road, like in the snow. And I was like, all right, that's it then. There I go. Fortunately, like a police officer wandered by and just sort of like picked me up and was very jovially like, I didn't understand because I didn't speak the dialect, but it was just like, haha, where are you going? What are you doing here? You look like you're in a bad way. And I like meekly showed him my train ticket. And he was like, ah! And then he put me in a taxi. And I was like, the whole time I was terrified because I was like, I don't have any money. Is this guy going to shank me when we get there? And I'm like, I have nothing. So that was a whole time. But I ended up being fine and suffering no lasting repercussions. I kind of expected to get frostbite or something at least, but nah, I got nothing. So I was extraordinarily lucky. Number 5 is an easy one in high school when I got a kidney stone. I've actually had kidney stones twice, but the second one was pretty fast and got it over with quickly. But when I was in high school, I got my first kidney stone, and I was in class, and I clearly was in pain, but I kept insisting I was fine, and it got bad enough that like I was super pale and people were worried. And finally, like someone came over and they were on my right side, and they said like, "Hey, look at me, you look really bad." And I turned in my chair to face them, so I turned like my chair sideways, and then I just blacked out. So like because I was in so much pain, so I just collapsed forward. I only blacked out for like a second or two, but like it was enough that I fainted. And then my teacher was like, holy shit, you go to the nurse. So I went to the nurse. They called a paramedic. I was like, no, don't call a paramedic, I'm poor. But I was in so much pain that I ended up throwing up. Paramedic came and they were like, I can't find your pulse. It's too weak. And I was like, am I going to die? And my dad got there and he was like, I didn't call the paramedic. I'm not paying for that ambulance. And he drove me to the hospital. And it was just a kidney stone. So I was fine. But wow, did that suck. Horrible. Number 4 is also while I was in Beijing, I had an ear infection. This is the last one that was in Beijing. I had an ear infection. I don't know where it came from or what happened. All I know is one day I woke up and I remember there was like a couple of seconds where I just sort of like, I adjusted to being awake and I didn't realize how much pain I was in. And then after a few seconds passed, I suddenly realized, oh my God, I'm in an extraordinary amount of pain. And then I just like started screaming. I have a really high pain tolerance. I'm very, very good at tolerating pain. But I was in such overwhelming pain. I've never done that. Like I've never just woken up and screamed before. Like not then or since. It was pretty incredible. So I woke up and I just started screaming. My boyfriend was there and he was like, what's going on? And I was like, I have no idea. We guessed because it was like in my ear, like eardrum or whatever, that it was an ear infection. So he ran to the pharmacy and bought some antibiotics for me. I guess you can buy them over the counter there. So he bought those, and then I took a day off of work and I stayed home and just like cried and screamed for hours until it finally faded. Again, I couldn't read the packaging, so I have no idea like how often I was supposed to take them. I was taking them every 12 hours, but maybe I should not have, because I ended up getting really, really, really sick after that. But that was less painful. But then I got better and everything was fine. Number 3 is when I was 18, I got a kidney infection. And now this is one of the ones where it's like, Nate was stupid, so it's my fault. I had a UTI, and I'd never had one before, so I did not know, I didn't know that I should go to the hospital and like get some antibiotics. I was just like, whatever this is, it'll go away. I'm sure if I just ignore it long enough, the problem will go away. It'll resolve itself. And it didn't. So the infection progressed from the UTI up into my kidney, and then I spent over a week in bed as my kidneys began to shut down, and it was horrible. It was horrible. I didn't eat for 4 days because I couldn't. I was puking a lot. My throat hurt so bad that I had the only time that I could bear the pain was when I was drinking cold water. But because I was drinking so much water, my stomach would fill up and be painful. So I had to keep making myself puke so that I could drink more water. Absolutely horrible, miserable time. I I kept passing out. I was delirious. I was hallucinating. I couldn't stand up. I was peeing blood. I was in so much pain. Um, I it 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 got very bad. It whew, it got pretty bad. Anyway, my dad brought me to a doctor, and I got an IV and yada yada yada, and then they were like, "Hey, stop dying," and then I stopped dying, and did better, and it was great. Um, Number two actually was really really recent, uh, like two like last month maybe even less. Um, I scratched my eyeball. Uh, I don't know, like I don't remember what the doctor called it, but like I scratched my eyeball right over my cornea. Like I wore the she described it as like there's a film over your eye, and I had worn it thin so that it was like rubbed thin, I guess. And it oh my god. Um the pain was unbelievable. Turns out there's also like virtually nothing they can do about eyeball pain too. Like you have a bunch of nerves there and stuff. So like the only thing they could do was put on these like numbing eye drops, but they only lasted like 10 minutes. And I don't know, you can overdose really easy on them, so they don't prescribe them to you. So you can't just stay like that. So you just have to bear it. Like Advil, Tylenol. Like I went to the doctor and the guy was like, "Hey, if prescribing you Vicodin would help, like a narcotic painkiller, I would, but it won't. So do your best." So I was in. I would describe it as if you ever have touched fiberglass, because I remember when I was a kid once, there was a big fiberglass case over like an electric unit, and I leaned on it with my arm, and I got a million little glass splinters in my forearm, and it was horrible. Maybe I should have put that on this list. It felt exactly like that, but on my actual eyeball. It was unbelievable, and it lasted for days. It was so bad, like I was wearing an eye patch because light hurt, air hurt, just opening my eye hurt, so I had to keep it closed. So I had to wear an eye patch to keep it closed, and also to keep myself from touching it because it felt like something was in there. Nothing was in there, but it had that phantom sensation, so I kept just like clawing at my eye. And that was making it significantly worse. So it was the most like miserable couple of days, like in a really long time. Definitely like horrifically, unimaginably painful. Cannot recommend. Don't do it. 0 out of 10. Never again. And then the exciting number one most painful experience of my life is I went into the dentist to get a filling because I had a little cavity, and so they drill in there, and they got me numb. They got me shot up with my Novocaine or whatever. I am numb, and then suddenly during the like while she's drilling, I'm overcome with like I was like I just started screaming. I've never done that. Just involuntarily begun screaming. I cannot focus. I'm out. I'm gone. I'm dead. And she was like, "What? What?" And I couldn't even talk. I was in so much pain. So they ended up shooting me 7 more times with like Novocaine to try to numb it, and it didn't even touch it. What had happened is they had drilled directly into a nerve in in my tooth, and the amount of pain was unfathomable. I didn't stop screaming until my throat was so hoarse that I couldn't anymore. I was sobbing. I couldn't see because I had so many tears. Like I could barely stand. It was the most pain I've ever been in my life. It was the most horrible experience. And eventually it kind of well, they gave me some painkillers. They at the first place I went, they didn't give me any narcotic painkillers, but then I went back into like an urgent care. It was like, "Hey, they drilled directly into a nerve and they just gave me Tylenol." And he was like, "What the hell?" I'd made an appointment with like a surgeon to get it fixed, but I had to wait a couple of days. So he gave me some narcotic painkillers, and then I just spent like the next 3 days sleeping on Vicodin because I couldn't I was in so much pain, and then I got it fixed, and it was fine, and now I'm fine. So that was a long one. I thought that this would be less long, but it wasn't. So I hope you enjoyed hearing these really stupid stories about horrible things that have happened to me. Mostly because I'm dumb. A lot of them happen because I'm kind of stupid. But, you know, if you enjoyed, leave a like, leave a comment or something. Give me that engagement. Subscribe if you want. I don't care. Anyway, catch you next time. Bye.